What if I told you that the very concept of time, the hours, the minutes, the rhythm of our days, was born not from gears and dials, but from the silent movement of shadows, the slow dance of the moon, and the ancient stories written in the stars? Long before the first mechanical clock ever ticked, human beings were already deeply entangled in a relationship with time, not as something to be captured or controlled, but as a living, breathing force woven into the world around them. Our ancestors looked up at the sky and saw more than beauty. They saw order, meaning, and a celestial clockwork that guided everything from when to plant crops to when to honor the gods. They didn't measure time, they listened to it, observed it, and built their lives in harmony with its natural flow. In this video, we're going to journey back to those early days of human curiosity, to a world without alarm clocks or digital counters, where time was told through the lengthening of a shadow, the phase of the moon, or the arrival of a star on the horizon. We'll explore how ancient civilizations from Egypt to Mesopotamia, from the Andes to the Indus Valley, developed remarkably sophisticated methods to track days, predict seasons, and mark celestial events with nothing but their eyes, their ingenuity, and their deep connection to the environment. These pre-clock chronologies weren't just practical tools, they were expressions of culture, faith, and humanity's desire to find our place within the vast, mysterious tapestry of the cosmos. You'll discover how these early systems shaped agriculture, religion, trade, and social structure in ways that still echo in our lives today. We'll uncover the stories behind the first calendars, the invention of devices like water clocks and sundials, and the sacred rituals that turned timekeeping into something both personal and profound. This is more than history, it's a testament to human creativity, resilience, and our timeless urge to make sense of the world. So come with me as we step into the footsteps of those who first dared to measure moments and see how their legacy lives on in every second we count. Picture yourself standing on a vast, open plain tens of thousands of years ago. There are no calendars on the wall, no notifications on a screen, not even a word for hour or week. Yet you are far from lost in time. Your entire existence is synchronized to a grand, natural rhythm. The first glimmer of dawn signals the start of activity. The creeping elongation of shadows tells you the day is waning, and the blanket of stars that follows the sun's departure maps out the night. This intimate, constant dialogue with the environment was humanity's original clock. Our earliest ancestors didn't invent timekeeping, they discovered it, etched into the very world around them. Their lives were governed by the undeniable logic of the sun's daily journey, the moon's patient cycle from slender crescent to full luminous orb and back again, and the slow, majestic turn of the seasons. A biting chill in the air meant a time for preservation and hunkering down, while the first green shoots of spring signaled a period of renewal and abundance. These cycles weren't just observed, they were felt deeply and personally as the fundamental pulse of life itself. This connection to natural time was about far more than simple survival. It was woven into the very fabric of their spiritual and cultural identity. For ancient hunter-gatherers, time was a story told around a fire, a narrative where the migration of a herd was a chapter and the flowering of a specific plant was a paragraph. They didn't just note that salmon swam upstream at a certain time of year. They wove that event into their mythology, creating stories and rituals that honored the salmon's return and ensured its place in communal memory for generations. Knowledge of when the first berries would ripen or when the birds would begin their southern flight was crucial, practical wisdom. but it was also sacred knowledge. It connected them to their ancestors who had followed the same patterns, and to the spirits of the land they believed governed these cycles. Time, therefore, was not a straight line marching from past to future, but a great spinning wheel. The same seasons returned, the same animals migrated, the same stars appeared. Life, death, and rebirth were part of an endless, repeating loop, and this cyclical view of time offered a sense of order and permanence in an often unpredictable world. This profound, foundational relationship with nature's rhythms established the core principles that would guide all future timekeeping. It set a crucial precedent. Time was something to be observed in the world, not manufactured in a workshop. The accuracy of a calendar was judged by how well it predicted the river's flood or the winter solstice, events everyone could witness. This reliance on universal celestial events also meant that while cultures across the globe would develop wildly different stories and devices to mark time, they were all ultimately looking at the same sun, the same moon, and the same stars. They were all asking the same fundamental questions and using the same celestial answers, laying a universal groundwork for the incredible chronological innovations that were yet to come. This deep-seated need to find our place within the cosmic dance, to anticipate what comes next, is a thread that connects us directly to those earliest timekeepers on the plain, forever looking to the sky for answers. But this deep, intuitive connection to nature's rhythms was just the beginning. As human societies grew more complex, transitioning from nomadic bands to settled agricultural civilizations, the need for a more precise and predictable measure of time became absolutely critical. This is where our ancestors truly began to look upward, not just with wonder, but with a calculating eye, turning the vast dome of the night sky into the world's first and most magnificent clock. Astronomy emerged as the undeniable cornerstone of all sophisticated ancient timekeeping. It was the one constant, the one reliable, repeating pattern that could be observed, recorded, and trusted to predict the future. Civilizations separated by vast oceans and continents all independently arrived at the same profound realization. The key to organizing human life on a grand scale was written in the stars. Consider the ancient Egyptians, whose entire civilization literally rose and fell with the Nile River. Their survival depended on anticipating the annual flood, which deposited the rich, fertile silt that made agriculture possible in the desert. They discovered that the heliacal rising of the star Sirius, that moment when it first becomes visible just before dawn after a period of being hidden by the sun's glare, coincided almost perfectly with the onset of the Nile's inundation. This celestial event became their new year, the absolute anchor of their calendar, their entire agricultural cycle, and by extension their economy, religion, and governance, was scheduled around this one astronomical observation. They didn't just watch the sky, they used it as a practical, life-saving almanac. To mark the passage of time during the day, they erected massive obelisks. These towering stone needles functioned as giant sundials, their moving shadows dividing the daylight hours into segments, turning public spaces into open-air timekeeping instruments. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the Babylonians were taking celestial observation to an entirely new level of mathematical precision. They were obsessive record keepers, compiling detailed clay tablet archives that tracked the motions of the sun, moon, and planets over centuries. This immense dataset allowed them to detect complex cycles, like the 18-year Saros cycle, which predicts eclipses. They developed a sophisticated Lunar-Solar calendar, ingeniously adding extra months when necessary to keep their lunar-based system in sync with the solar year. Their greatest legacy to modern timekeeping might be their love of the number 60. They used a sexagesimal base 60 system for mathematics, which is why we still have 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour today. Their work was a fusion of meticulous science and astrology, believing celestial events were divine messages, but their methods for predicting those events were grounded in rigorous, repeatable observation. And we see this pattern echoed across the ancient world. In what is now England, the mysterious builders of Stonehenge aligned its massive heel stone with the summer solstice sunrise, creating a breathtakingly accurate astronomical observatory built of stone. Across Europe, cultures built circles of wooden posts to mark the solstices and equinoxes, communal calendars that brought people together to witness and celebrate these pivotal turning points of the year. These structures were more than just tools. They were sacred spaces where the rhythm of the cosmos met the rhythm of human ritual. This astronomical prowess fundamentally bridged the ancient world's gap between myth and science. The sun wasn't just a fiery disk, it was the god Ra crossing the sky in his solar bark. The predictable, cyclical nature of these events reinforced a cosmic order, a concept the Egyptians called Mat and the Mesopotamians called Me. By understanding and accurately predicting celestial events, priests and rulers weren't just demonstrating cleverness. They were demonstrating their ability to interpret and uphold the divine order of the universe itself, weaving together practical necessity, political power, and spiritual belief into a single, coherent system for measuring existence. Of all the celestial bodies our ancestors observed, none held more immediate, tangible power over daily life than the sun. Its relentless, predictable journey from horizon to horizon provided the most fundamental division of time, the day itself. Harnessing this power led to one of the most elegant and widespread timekeeping inventions in human history, the sundial. The principle was brilliantly simple. A vertical stick or stone slab called a gnomon was placed in the ground. As the sun moved, the gnomon's shadow would sweep across a marked surface, its length and direction indicating the time. The earliest evidence of these shadow clocks comes from ancient Egypt around 1500 BCE, but the concept is so intuitive it likely emerged independently in multiple cultures. These weren't just crude markers. The Egyptians engineered them with remarkable precision, often carving complex hour lines into flat stone tablets to account for the sun's changing path through the seasons. The evolution of the sundial is a story of increasing portability and public utility. The Egyptians, for instance, developed smaller, handheld versions for travelers and officials. Imagine a high-ranking administrator journeying up the Nile, pulling out a portable sundial to ensure he stayed on schedule for meetings or religious observances. These personal timekeepers were a significant leap, democratizing time measurement beyond fixed public monuments. But it was the Romans who truly industrialized the concept, turning timekeeping into a public service and a symbol of civic order. They constructed massive, ornate sundials in their forums and public squares, some so large they could be read from a significant distance. One famous example, the Solarium Augusti, used an Egyptian obelisk as its gnomon, casting a shadow across a vast pavement inscribed with a grid that functioned as both a clock and a calendar. For the average Roman citizen, the ringing of a public bell, often timed by such a dial, would signal the opening of the courts, the start of business, or the beginning of a gladiatorial event. Solar time became the rhythm of the city, yet for all their brilliance, sundials had inherent and frustrating limitations. They were, as the saying goes, fair weather friends. A cloudy day rendered them utterly useless, and of course, they offered no help whatsoever during the night. Furthermore, a sundial told what is known as apparent solar time, time based on the actual position of the sun in the sky. Because the Earth's orbit is elliptical and its axis is tilted, the length of a solar day actually varies slightly throughout the year. This meant that a sundial might be a few minutes fast or slow compared to a perfectly uniform clock. Despite these drawbacks, the psychological impact of the sundial was profound. It took the abstract, flowing concept of a day and chopped it into manageable, named segments hours. This division fostered an entirely new sense of temporal order and punctuality, moving society from a general sense of morning, noon, and evening towards a more regimented structure for work, prayer, and social life. It was the first major step in humanity's long journey to quantify and compartmentalize time, transforming it from a natural phenomenon into a measurable resource. While the sun provided the steady beat of the day, it was the moon that offered humanity its first natural measure of longer cycles, with its mesmerizing and predictable metamorphosis from a sliver of light to a glowing orb and back into darkness. That 29.5-day cycle of phases became the foundational unit for calendars across the globe, creating a system that was intimately visible to everyone. Unlike the sun's path, which requires careful measurement to track its subtle shifts, the moon's changing face is unmistakable. A new moon meant a fresh start, a time of darkness perfect for planning and reflection. The first appearance of the waxing crescent was a cause for celebration and announcement, a visual signal that a new period had officially begun. The full moon provided a brilliant, natural lantern in the night sky, illuminating activities and gatherings, while the waning moon signaled a time of winding down, of completion and release. This celestial rhythm was so universally observed that it became deeply embedded in the very language of time. The word month itself is etymologically rooted in moon. This universal appeal led to the independent development of lunar calendars in societies separated by vast oceans. In Mesopotamia, the birthplace of some of our earliest written records, the lunar calendar was the official timekeeping standard. Priests would carefully watch for the first crescent moon, and upon sighting it, messengers would be dispatched to declare the start of the new month across the kingdom. The months were given names that often reflected agricultural tasks or weather patterns, like the month of brick-making when the mud was right, or the month of harvest. Similarly, in ancient China, the calendar was lunar-solar, with months beginning at the new moon and important festivals like the Chinese New Year determined by its phases. Even today, many traditional Chinese holidays, such as the Mid-Autumn Festival, are celebrated on specific lunar dates, maintaining a timeless connection to this ancient rhythm. However, a significant challenge emerged for any civilization that relied heavily on agriculture. The lunar year and the solar year are out of sync. 12 lunar months only add up to about 354 days, falling roughly 11 days short of the 365-day solar year that governs the seasons. If left uncorrected, a festival celebrating the spring harvest would, over just a few years, slowly drift into the heat of summer and eventually into winter, completely divorcing the calendar from the agricultural reality it was meant to organize. To solve this problem, ancient astronomers devised a brilliant fix, the Intercalary month. Periodically, about every 2 to 3 years, an extra 13th month would be inserted into the year to nudge the lunar calendar back into alignment with the sun's journey. Deciding when to add this month was a task of immense importance, often reserved for priests or rulers, as it was seen as maintaining the cosmic order itself. The Babylonians became masters of this system, developing complex cycles to predict when these adjustments were needed. The cultural and religious significance of the lunar calendar remains powerfully alive in the modern world, most prominently in the Islamic Hijri calendar. It is a pure lunar calendar consisting of 12 months that total 354 or 355 days. This means that Islamic holy months like Ramadan and associated festivals migrate throughout the solar seasons, completing a full cycle approximately every 33 years. This practice ensures that the experience of fasting during Ramadan, for instance, is shared equally by all believers across the globe, sometimes occurring in the short days of winter and other times in the long, hot days of summer. This continuous migration reinforces a focus on faith rather than seasonal tradition, creating a unique relationship with time that is untethered from the solar year. The persistence of this system is a testament to the enduring power of the moon as a timekeeper, not for agriculture, but for spiritual practice and community cohesion, proving that its role extends far beyond mere practicality into the deepest realms of human belief and identity. Yet while the sun dictated the day and the moon measured the months, it was the vast, fixed tapestry of the stars that provided the ultimate map for grander cycles of time. Unlike the wandering planets or the constantly shifting sun and moon, the stars maintain their relative positions with such perfect regularity that they form a celestial clockwork of breathtaking precision. Ancient astronomers realized that this starry dome rotates predictably throughout the night and slowly shifts over the course of a year, offering a stable backdrop against which to mark the passage of seasons and years. The most crucial stellar event was the heliacal rising, the first day in the year a particular star becomes visible just above the eastern horizon moments before sunrise, after a long period of being lost in the sun's glare. This event became a powerful, unmistakable alarm clock for entire civilizations. In Egypt, as we've seen, the heliacal rising of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, was the herald of the Nile's life-giving flood. But this practice was global. In ancient Greece, the appearance of the star cluster Pleiades signaled the start of the sailing season, a critical time for trade and travel, while its setting in the autumn warned of the coming storms. For farmers in Mesopotamia, the heliacal rising of the constellation Orion indicated it was time to prepare the fields for planting. This practice of using stars as seasonal markers is known as parapegma, and it transformed the night sky into a dynamic, rotating calendar that was accurate to within a day or two each year. This stellar knowledge reached its absolute zenith not in the great empires of the Mediterranean, but in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean with the Polynesian navigators. These incredible voyagers embarked on journeys spanning thousands of miles across open water, navigating to tiny, remote islands without a single compass or chart as we know them. Their entire system relied on a deep, memorized knowledge of the stars. They conceptualized the sky as a great dome, and they knew which stars would pass directly over each of their destination islands. They didn't just see individual stars, they saw star paths, the specific sequence of stars that would rise and set along a given bearing, creating a celestial highway across the ocean. A navigator would steer his canoe by keeping the rising point of a specific guide star constant on the horizon. As that star climbed too high or set, he would seamlessly transition to the next star in the sequence, maintaining his course through the night. This required an encyclopedic knowledge of hundreds of stars and their relationships, a body of knowledge passed down through generations in elaborate chants and oral traditions. For them, the stars were not just markers of time, but a literal navigational grid that mapped the entire Pacific, enabling the settlement of islands from Hawaii to New Zealand in one of humanity's most astounding feats of exploration. On land, this stellar observation evolved into a more symbolic and predictive system with the development of the Zodiac. This concept, refined by the Babylonians and later adopted by the Greeks, divided the path of the sun, moon, and planets, a band of sky called the ecliptic, into 12 equal sections, each 30 degrees wide and named after the constellation that originally lay within it. This created a sophisticated coordinate system for the sky, but its genius was in its connection to the cycles of life on Earth. As the sun appeared to move through each zodiacal sign over the course of a year, it was correlated with seasonal changes, the heat of Leo associated with the peak of summer, the cooling balance of Libra with the autumn equinox, and the dormant depth of Capricorn with the winter solstice. This created a powerful narrative that linked the unchanging, mechanical motion of the heavens directly to the rhythmic patterns of weather, agriculture, and by extension, human fortune and personality. It was the ultimate expression of the ancient belief in a unified cosmos, where events in the sky were intimately connected to events on Earth. This system provided a framework not just for marking time, but for attempting to understand its meaning and our place within its flow, blending precise astronomy with mythology and early psychology to create a complete cosmic story. But the sun, moon, and stars, for all their cosmic grandeur, shared one profound limitation. They were utterly powerless on a cloudy day or during the deep of night. Humanity's quest to master time demanded a tool that could function anywhere, anytime, independent of the whims of weather or the cycles of the sky. The answer flowed quite literally from one of our most essential resources, water. The invention of the water clock, or clepsydra, a name derived from the Greek words for thief and water, was a revolutionary breakthrough. It was the world's first portable, self-contained timekeeping device, and it worked on an elegantly simple principle. Imagine two containers, one positioned above the other. The upper vessel is filled with water and has a small, carefully calibrated hole near its base. Drop by drop, water steals out of this opening, steadily collecting in the lower container. By marking lines on the inside of the upper vessel or watching the water level rise in the lower one, you could see time literally accumulating before your eyes. This steady, measurable flow translated the abstract passage of moments into a visible, physical process. Evidence of these early clepsydras dates back to around 1600 BC in both ancient Egypt and Babylon. In Egypt, they were often used for a very specific and practical purpose, timing the hours of the night. Priests needed to know when to perform specific nightly rituals, and water clocks provided a reliable way to divide the darkness into defined watches, ensuring their offerings were made at the correct celestial hour even when the stars were obscured. In the courtrooms and assemblies of ancient Athens, the water clock became an instrument of democracy. Orators were given a fair and equal amount of time to present their cases, not by the subjective judgment of a human moderator, but by the impartial flow of water. A large clepsydra would be filled, and the speaker would begin. When the vessel was empty, his time was up. This ensured that legal proceedings were orderly and that no single voice could dominate the conversation, literally using the flow of time to safeguard civic fairness. The true ingenuity of the human mind, however, is never satisfied with simple beginnings. While the basic clepsydra was effective, it had a frustrating flaw. As the water level in the upper vessel decreased, the water pressure at the outlet also dropped, causing the flow to gradually slow down. This meant that an hour measured early in the cycle was actually shorter than an hour measured later on. To solve this, innovators across cultures began engineering ever more complex mechanisms. The Greeks, masters of mechanics, developed clepsydras with conical or parabolic inner containers that tapered toward the outlet. This shape compensated for the dropping pressure, ensuring a much more consistent and reliable flow rate. Some models even incorporated early gear systems and floats that would trigger bells or move pointers to audibly or visually signal the passage of a set period, transforming the clock from a simple measurer into an early alarm system. This drive for precision reached its absolute peak in ancient China during the Song dynasty. Here, a brilliant scientist and statesman named Su Song, in the 11th century CE, constructed a monumental water-driven astronomical clock tower that stands as one of the most mechanical marvels of the ancient world. This was no simple water clock. It was a complex, multi-story engine of timekeeping. Its power came from a constant level water tank that fed a water wheel, which in turn drove a complex series of gears and escapements, a mechanism that regulates power release, a crucial precursor to the mechanical clock. This incredible machine didn't just tell the time of day. It animated a rotating celestial globe that mapped the movements of the stars and activated a series of mannequins that would ring bells and gongs to announce the hours. It was a breathtaking synthesis of timekeeping, astronomy, and automata, all powered by the relentless, steady flow of water. This device represented the final, most sophisticated expression of the clepsydra principle, a bridge technology that took the ancient idea of flowing water and used it to power the first mechanical steps toward a new era of timekeeping, one that would eventually leave the elements behind entirely. But while water flowed to mark the hours, another elemental force, fire, offered an equally compelling, yet completely different, approach to capturing time. The concept was beautifully straightforward. If a substance burns at a consistent and predictable rate, its consumption becomes a perfect physical manifestation of duration. This led to the development of two ingenious and aromatic timekeeping devices, the candle clock and the incense clock. In ancient China, particularly during the Song dynasty, candle clocks became a common feature in homes and temples. Artisans would craft candles of a uniform wax composition and thickness, then inscribe them with a series of evenly spaced marks. As the flame steadily consumed the wax, each mark that melted away represented the passage of a specific interval, perhaps an hour or a watch of the night. This provided a gentle, flickering timeline that could be easily monitored indoors, completely unaffected by cloudy skies or the setting sun. Some versions were even more elaborate, incorporating metal nails into the wax at measured intervals. As the candle burned down to a nail, the metal would drop audibly into a waiting tray below, creating a simple but effective acoustic alarm to signal a change in shift, the end of a meditation period, or the need to tend to a task. The principle found a parallel application in medieval Europe, especially within the disciplined walls of monasteries. The monastic day was divided into 8 canonical hours, periods set aside for prayer, work, and reflection that structured the entire life of the community. The great mechanical clocks that would later toll these hours had not yet been invented, and relying on sundials for nighttime prayers was impossible. The candle clock provided an elegant solution. A large candle, often marked for the 8 periods, would be lit, and its slow, steady burn would govern the rhythm of monastic life. Its soft, warm light was a perfect companion for nocturnal vigils, and its predictable consumption made it a reliable, if approximate, measure for coordinating activities across a large abbey. This use highlights how these devices were not just practical tools but also spiritual aids, their very consumption a quiet metaphor for the transience of earthly life and the steady, irreversible journey of the soul. Yet for sheer elegance and multi-sensory experience, nothing could surpass the incense clock. This was a technology perfected in China and Japan, where it elevated timekeeping into an art form. The basic design involved a long, powdered incense stick, meticulously crafted to ensure an incredibly consistent burn rate. This stick would be placed in a long, decorative tray, often made of beautifully carved wood or precious metal, and lit at one end. As the incense smoldered, it would travel along a pre-marked path in the tray, each segment representing a defined period, but the true genius lay in the variations. Some designs used different colored sands or powders to visually separate the hours. Others, however, incorporated a form of early automation that was nothing short of brilliant. The incense stick itself could be blended with different fragrant resins, so that as it burned, the scent would change from, say, sandalwood to lavender to musk, allowing a person to know the time even with their eyes closed, simply by the shifting aroma in the room. The most intricate versions, however, were the true marvels. Artisans would weave a delicate thread through the incense stick, suspending tiny metal weights or bells at precise intervals. As the burning incense reached a weight, the thread would be severed, and the weight would drop with a soft clink onto a resonant plate made of bronze or porcelain. In more elaborate setups, multiple threads and bells could be arranged to create a sequence of chimes, effectively turning the clock into a melodic instrument that announced the hours. This made incense clocks particularly popular for ceremonial and scholarly use. A scholar deep in meditation or calligraphy could work without constantly watching a dial. The changing fragrance or the gentle chime of a bell would discreetly inform him of the time. At court, these devices timed diplomatic meetings and rituals, their exquisite craftsmanship and pleasant aroma reflecting the refinement and sophistication of the culture itself. The incense clock was perhaps the most holistic timekeeper ever invented, engaging sight, smell, and sound to create a serene and beautiful way to experience the passage of moments, proving that practicality and artistry could be seamlessly fused in humanity's quest to measure time. Yet while the steady drip of water and the slow burn of incense marked time with fluidity and fragrance, another medium offered something entirely different: perfect consistency and stark, granular precision. Enter the Sandglass, or as it's more poetically known, the hourglass. This deceptively simple device, believed to have emerged in medieval Europe around the 8th century, represented a monumental leap in reliability for measuring shorter, standardized intervals. Its design was a masterpiece of minimalist engineering: 2 glass bulbs connected by a narrow neck with just enough fine, dry sand in the upper chamber to take exactly 1 hour, or sometimes 30 minutes or even just a few moments to stream into the lower one. The genius was in its utter independence. Unlike a water clock, its flow wasn't affected by freezing temperatures or evaporation. Unlike a sundial, it worked in pitch darkness or the depths of a ship's hold. And unlike a candle, its burn rate was perfectly consistent and posed no fire risk. Once the sand had run out, all you had to do was invert it, and the measurement could begin again, instantly and without any need for recalibration or refilling. It was the first truly reusable, all-weather, portable timepiece. This rugged reliability made the Sandglass absolutely indispensable in 3 critical areas of medieval life: the sea, the church, and the home. For sailors navigating the treacherous and featureless open ocean, the hourglass was a vital tool for maintaining a ship's watch system. The day and night were divided into shifts, or watches, typically of 4 hours each, but these were further broken down into 30-minute segments marked by turning the glass. A designated crew member, often a young ship's boy, had the sole responsibility of turning the hourglass and ringing the ship's bell to signal the passage of each half hour. This created the famous system of bells that still echoes in maritime tradition today. 8 bells signified the end of a 4-hour watch. This regimented timekeeping was not about punctuality for its own sake. It was a matter of life and death, ensuring a fresh, alert crew was always on duty to handle the sails and watch for hazards. On solid ground within the hallowed silence of monasteries and churches, the hourglass found a different but equally important purpose: governing the rhythm of spiritual life. It sat on the pulpits of great cathedrals, used by priests to ensure their sermons did not run too long and try the patience of their congregation. More profoundly, it was used to time periods of silent prayer, meditation, and devotional reading, ensuring a disciplined and equal allotment of time for each sacred activity. In an age before personal timepieces, the slow, silent trickle of sand in a glass bulb became a visual metaphor for the soul's journey, a quiet, contemplative companion to prayer that made the abstract passage of time something one could watch and almost feel. In the domestic sphere, the hourglass moved from the profound to the profoundly practical. Cooks in great manor houses and humble kitchens alike used smaller, minute-long sandglasses to time the boiling of eggs with a consistency previously impossible. Apothecaries used them to ensure precise mixing times for potions and tinctures. University lecturers used them to structure debates, and lawyers in court used them to time speeches. Its use became so widespread that it transcended its function as a mere tool and seeped into the very culture of the time. It appeared in paintings, often in still life works known as vanitas, which emphasized the transience of life and the vanity of earthly pleasures. Here, the hourglass was placed next to skulls, wilting flowers, and guttered candles as a stark memento mori, a reminder that our time is finite and constantly ebbing away. This powerful symbolism cemented its place not just as a device for measuring minutes, but as a timeless icon of time's inevitable, impartial, and unyielding march. Yet, even as cultures engineered ever more clever devices to capture time, from the flow of water to the fall of sand, the most ancient and universal timekeeper of all remained the living world itself. Long before the first sundial cast a shadow or the first water clock began to drip, humanity was reading the time from a far more vibrant and interconnected source, the biological rhythms of the earth. This was timekeeping woven directly into the fabric of life, a system that required no invention, only profound observation and a deep, intuitive connection to the environment. Our own bodies come pre-equipped with this understanding. We all possess an innate circadian rhythm, an internal biological clock that regulates our sleep-wake cycle, hormone release, and even body temperature in a roughly 24-hour pattern, a silent, internal echo of the planet's daily rotation. But ancient societies extended this principle outward, viewing the entire natural world as a vast, animated clock face where every creature and plant played the role of a moving hand. This practice, often called phonology, the study of cyclic and seasonal natural phenomena, was the bedrock of practical, daily timekeeping for countless generations. It was a knowledge system built on a million tiny, recurring details. The first pre-dawn crow of a rooster wasn't just a farmyard noise. It was a reliable, living alarm clock that signaled the approaching sunrise, prompting people to rise and begin their day. The sudden chorus of certain birds at dusk marked the day's end as clearly as any bell, but the signals extended far beyond the audible. The arrival of a specific species of migratory goose or swallow announced the unmistakable turn of a season. The sight of salmon swimming upstream was a precise calendar event, signaling the time for communities to gather at fishing grounds. Even the behavior of insects held meaning. The first chirp of crickets on a summer evening or the sudden silence of frogs in the autumn carried temporal information that was essential for survival. The plant kingdom provided an equally rich and colorful tapestry of time indicators. For agricultural societies, the blooming of a particular flower was not merely a sign of beauty but a critical directive. In Japan, the centuries-old tradition of hanami, the celebration of the cherry blossoms, has its roots in this very practice, as the blooming was historically used to divine the year's harvest and schedule the planting of rice. In ancient Greece, the flowering of the heliotrope was said to coincide with the rising of the dog star, Sirius. The first appearance of buds on certain trees, the changing color of leaves, even the specific timing of when certain nuts or berries ripened, All of these were meticulously noted and passed down through generations in oral traditions, songs, and folklore. This knowledge wasn't abstract, it was directly tied to action. The blooming of the dogwood might mean it was time to plant corn. The falling of certain leaves could indicate that the hunting season for a particular animal had begun. This created a seamless, holistic system where the measurement of time was indistinguishable from the practice of living. You didn't check a clock to know what to do. You looked at the world around you and understood your place within its cycle. This deep integration fostered a relationship with time that was fundamentally different from our modern, mechanized one. Time was not a universal constant to be measured in identical minutes and hours across the globe. It was deeply local, fluid, and organic. A moment might be the time it took to bring a pot of water to a boil. An afternoon could be defined by the length of a shadow cast by a familiar tree. This system was inherently harmonious, framing humans not as masters of time, but as participants within a larger, living system. There was no fighting against the clock, no concept of wasting time, because time was simply the rhythm of life itself, inseparable from the environment that produced it. This stands in stark contrast to the mechanical time that would later emerge, which standardized and commodified time, divorcing it from its natural origins and creating a universal, but often impersonal, framework that schedules our lives today. The ancient practice of reading nature's clock represented the purest form of timekeeping, one that required no technology beyond a keen eye, a tuned ear, and a profound respect for the intricate, beautiful, and perfectly timed dance of the natural world. Yet the measurement of time was never merely a practical endeavor for agriculture or navigation. For countless ancient cultures, it was a sacred act, a way of aligning human existence with the divine order of the cosmos itself. This profound spiritual impulse gave rise to some of the most intricate and sophisticated timekeeping systems ever devised, the sacred calendar. Unlike a simple tally of days for planting or harvest, these calendars were complex metaphysical machines, designed not just to track time, but to ritualize it, to infuse every moment with religious significance, and to ensure that human activity resonated in harmony with the gods. They were less about marking the passage of time and more about participating in its eternal, cyclical nature, using elaborate chronological structures to create a bridge between the earthly and the celestial realms. Consider the remarkable system of the Aztecs, a masterpiece of interlocking cycles. They operated two distinct calendars simultaneously, a combination that governed every aspect of life. The first was the Zu-Pohualli, or solar year calendar, consisting of 18 months with 20 days each, plus 5 ominous and unlucky days at the year's end, creating a 365-day cycle that aligned with the agricultural season. But running alongside it was the truly sacred calendar, the Tonal-Pohualli, or count of days. This was a 260-day cycle composed of 20-day signs like jaguar, wind, or rain, combined with the numbers 1 through 13. Each unique combination of a number and a day sign carried its own specific spiritual meaning, omen, and patron deity. A priest or tonalpauk would use this calendar to divine the fate of a newborn, determine the auspiciousness of a military campaign, or schedule a religious ceremony. The two calendars would align only once every 52 years, a period known as the calendar round, which was met with tremendous anxiety and culminated in the magnificent new fire ceremony, a ritual to literally rekindle the sun and prevent the world from ending. Here, time was not a resource, it was a living, divine force, and its careful measurement was a form of worship and survival. This concept of a sacred, divinatory calendar was not unique to Mesoamerica. On the other side of the world, the ancient Hebrew calendar presents another fascinating example of time interwoven with faith. It is a lunar-solar system, primarily following the phases of the moon for its months, but inserting an extra month, Adar Roman II, 7 times every 19 years to keep the lunar months in step with the solar-based agricultural seasons. This was absolutely essential because the dates of the most important Jewish holidays are not arbitrary. They are directly tied to both historical events and seasonal realities. Passover, for instance, must always occur in the spring month of Nisan, commemorating the Exodus and coinciding with the barley harvest. Sukkot, the festival of booths, falls in the autumn month of Tishrei, aligning with the final harvest and reminding the community of their ancestors' wanderings in the wilderness. The calendar itself was so sacred that its observation was a central commandment, and the declaration of a new month based on the sighting of the new moon by witnesses was a solemn public duty, sanctifying time itself and making the entire community a participant in its ongoing creation. Perhaps the most mind-bending of all these sacred systems was the Maya long count calendar, a linear chronology that measured vast expanses of time with breathtaking precision. While they also used a sacred 260-day Tzolk'in cycle and a solar Hob cycle similar to the Aztecs, the long count was their masterwork for historical and prophetic timekeeping. It counted days, or K'ins, from a mythical starting point the Maya believed was the day of the creation of the present world. This count organized time into nested cycles. 20 K'ins made a winnel, 18 winnels made a ton, a 360-day year, 20 tons made a K'aton, and 20 K'atons made a bakton, a cycle of 144,000 days, or roughly 394 years. The completion of a full 13 bakton cycle, approximately 5,125 years, was a moment of immense cosmic significance, marking the end of one world age and the beginning of another. This wasn't just history, it was prophecy. The Maya believed time was cyclical, and the events of a previous cycle would echo in the new one. Their priests meticulously recorded historical events on stone stelae, not just to memorialize kings, but to map these cosmic patterns, using the past to predict the future and schedule rituals that would appease the gods and ensure the cycle's continuation. For them, chronology was the ultimate expression of cosmology, a mathematical language for speaking with the divine. While sacred calendars wove time into the fabric of the cosmos, the most urgent and universal driver for measuring its passage was far more grounded: the absolute necessity of eating. For the vast majority of human history, survival was not a given. It was a precarious balance that hinged on planting and harvesting at the exact right moment. A miscalculation of just a few weeks could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest that sustained a community through winter and a devastating famine that wiped it out. This relentless pressure is what gave rise to the world's first practical, large-scale timekeeping systems, the seasonal and agricultural calendar. These were not abstract philosophical constructs, they were working manuals for survival, born from millennia of meticulous observation and hard-won experience, directly linking the movement of the heavens to the labor of human hands in the soil. The classic example, and one of the most successful, is the ancient Egyptian calendar. Its entire structure was a direct response to the single most important event in their world, the annual inundation of the Nile River. Each summer, fed by monsoon rains far to the south, the Nile would overflow its banks, spreading a layer of incredibly rich, fertile silt across the parched valley. This event was their lifeline. The Egyptian calendar was therefore brilliantly simple and tripartite, dividing the year into 3 seasons, each 4 months long, that reflected the river's cycle and the agricultural tasks it dictated. Merckhit was the inundation, the time of flooding when the land was underwater and farming was impossible. This was a period for communal labor on state projects like pyramid building, as the population was freed from fieldwork. As the waters receded, the season of perrot, or emergence, began. This was the time of sowing, when the water-saturated soil was perfect for planting seeds. Finally, Shemu, the harvest season, was a period of intense, scorching heat where the crops were gathered and stored before the river rose once more. The genius of this system was its perfect alignment with an environmental heartbeat. The calendar didn't just measure time, it was the rhythm of the Nile, and by extension, the rhythm of all Egyptian life, from the lowliest farmer to the pharaoh himself. To predict this crucial flooding event with even greater accuracy, the Egyptians, as we've seen, tied their calendar to a celestial event, the heliacal rising of Sirius. But this practice of using the stars as a farmer's almanac was a global phenomenon. In ancient Greece, the poet Hesiod wrote a famous didactic poem called Works and Days, which was essentially a poetic calendar of the farmer's year, filled with astronomical advice. He instructs his brother to ply the weary ox for plowing when the Pleiades star cluster sets at dawn, signaling the start of autumn, and to begin the harvest when the same cluster rises at daybreak, heralding the start of summer. For a Roman farmer, the pre-dawn rising of the constellation Virgo might indicate it was time to prune the vines, while the morning setting of Aquarius signaled the approach of winter rains. This knowledge transformed the night sky from a beautiful spectacle into a practical, rotating billboard of agricultural instructions. Its messages understood by generations of farmers who knew exactly which celestial sign meant it was time to sharpen their scythes or mend their irrigation channels. This deep integration of timekeeping and labor is perhaps most vividly illustrated by the calendars of ancient Mesopotamia, where the months themselves were often named after the primary agricultural activity performed within them. Imagine a calendar that didn't say January or February, but instead had names that directly told you what to do. Cuneiform tablets reveal Sumerian and Babylonian month names like Month of Barley Harvest, Month of Opening the Dikes, and Month of the Plough. A name like Month of Eating the Milk of the Herd might seem poetic, but it was intensely practical, indicating a time when livestock were being milked and dairy was abundant. This system embedded the calendar directly into the muscle memory of daily life. You didn't need to consult a priest or an astronomer to know what time it was. The name of the month itself was a command, a reminder of the collective task at hand that ensured the entire community worked in synchrony. The calendar was the schedule for the world's oldest and most important job. This practical focus on food security and environmental adaptation was the engine behind the development of accurate timekeeping. Getting the timing right meant everything. It meant knowing precisely when to sow wheat so it would have enough moisture to germinate, but not so much that it would rot. It meant coordinating the massive communal labor required for harvesting before a storm could destroy a season's worth of grain. It meant scheduling the breeding of livestock so that young would be born in the spring when food was plentiful. The calendar was the tool that organized this chaos, turning the uncertainty of subsistence farming into a manageable, predictable process. It created community stability by ensuring that everyone from the field workers to the rulers who stored the surplus grain was operating on the same temporal page. This wasn't about efficiency or productivity in the modern sense. It was about resilience. A well-kept calendar was a community's best defense against the unforgiving whims of nature, a testament to humanity's ability to observe, learn, and plan for the future, ensuring that the relentless turning of the seasons became a source of sustenance rather than fear. Moving beyond the grand cycles of sacred and agricultural calendars, this drive for precision found its most tangible expression in the very stones ancient civilizations left behind. The most iconic of these early timekeeping monuments were the towering Egyptian obelisks. These were not merely symbols of pharaonic power. They were colossal, functional sundials that transformed entire city squares into public clocks. Crafted from a single piece of red granite and often sheathed in electrum to catch the first and last rays of the sun, an obelisk acted as a massive gnomon. Its shadow, sweeping in a perfect arc across the surrounding pavement, would move between markers that divided the daylight hours. The length and direction of this shadow told more than just the time of day. As the sun's path shifted with the seasons, the shadow's pattern also provided a rough guide to the time of year. For the average Egyptian, the moving shadow of the obelisk was a shared communal timepiece, synchronizing daily life, dictating when markets opened, when ceremonies began, and when laborers' shifts ended. It was timekeeping on a monumental scale, literally casting the authority of the state and the gods across the land in a daily display of celestial order. But to achieve such perfect alignment with the heavens, the Egyptians needed tools of even greater precision. This is where the Merckhit comes into play, a device that reveals the astonishing sophistication of their astronomical science. The Merckhit, whose name translates to instrument of knowledge, was essentially an ancient theodolite or transit instrument. It consisted of a horizontal bar with a plumb bob hanging from it, used to ensure a perfectly vertical reference line. A second sighting tool, often a palm rib with a slit cut in it, would be used to align stars with this vertical line. A priest astronomer known as an hour watcher would work in pairs at night. Each would set up their Merckhit aligned to a north-south meridian. Then, by carefully observing the transit of specific circumpolar stars across this meridian line, they could determine the exact time at night with remarkable accuracy. They had star tables that catalogued which decan stars rose at each hour of the night throughout the year, effectively creating a stellar clock that ticked through the darkness. The application of this technology was profound. It was the Merckhit that allowed engineers to orient the pyramids and temples with such breathtaking accuracy, aligning them to true north or to the rising point of a significant star like Sirius. This wasn't just for architectural grandeur. It was a form of weaving the cosmic order into the very fabric of their most sacred buildings. When the first light of the dawn sun on the summer solstice streamed perfectly down the corridor of a temple to illuminate the statue of a god deep within its inner sanctum, it was the Merckhit that made such a miraculous event possible. This device represents the crucial link between simple observation and precise engineering, proving that ancient timekeeping was a science that required deep mathematical understanding, meticulous record-keeping, and expertly crafted tools. Ultimately, these devices served a dual purpose that went far beyond mere functionality. A pharaoh who commissioned a towering obelisk was doing more than just giving his people a way to tell time. He was demonstrating his unique ability to commune with the gods and harness the power of the cosmos itself. The obelisk, piercing the sky and touching the sun god Ra, was a physical conduit of divine power, and the pharaoh's control over this celestial machinery legitimized his right to rule. Similarly, the knowledge required to use the Merckhit was esoteric, held by a powerful priestly class who acted as the sole interpreters of the celestial will. By controlling the calendar, the rituals, and the very alignment of the state's most important structures, they wielded immense influence. These timekeeping instruments were, therefore, powerful tools of propaganda and social control. They made the abstract concept of cosmic order visible, tangible, and utterly dependent on the ruling hierarchy. The message was clear: just as the sun, moon, and stars moved in a perfect, predictable dance ordained by the gods, so too did human society function under the divinely sanctioned order of its rulers. The measurement of time was never neutral. It was always embedded with meaning, reinforcing the political and spiritual structures that held ancient civilizations together. Yet while the grand obelisks of Egypt and the complex Merckhits of its priests represent a centralized, monumental approach to time, the story of chronology is not one of uniformity. In fact, the very opposite is true. The methods humans developed to measure time were not dictated by a universal blueprint, but were instead sculpted by the land itself. Geography was the silent, powerful architect of timekeeping, forcing cultures to adapt their systems to the unique challenges and opportunities presented by their environment. The relentless midnight sun of the Arctic, the vast, star-drenched skies of the desert, the rhythmic pulse of the ocean's tides, and the deep, shadow-carved valleys of mountain ranges, each of these landscapes demanded a different kind of clock, a different way of seeing and segmenting existence. This resulted in a breathtaking diversity of chronological systems, each one a perfect, ingenious adaptation to its specific corner of the world. Consider the profound challenge faced by the Inuit and other circumpolar cultures. Here, the most fundamental temporal rhythm known to humanity, the reliable daily alternation of sun and darkness, simply vanishes for large parts of the year. During the summer, the sun might not set for months, creating a period of continuous daylight known as the midnight sun. Conversely, the polar night brings an equally long stretch of perpetual darkness. A sundial is worse than useless here. It is a meaningless concept for much of the year. So how did these cultures track time? They became masters of reading subtler, but no less reliable, natural indicators. Their calendar was not divided into 24-hour days, but into lunar months, each named after a dominant environmental event. A month might be the time when the caribou herds migrate, the time when the seal pups are born, or the time of the first snowfall. Time was measured by the thickness of sea ice, the quality of the sunlight, even at midnight. Its angle and color would change throughout the day, and the behavior of animals. The year was a cycle of preparedness, knowing when to hunt specific species, when to store food, and when to travel. Their sense of time was fluid, ecological, and deeply tied to survival tasks, a brilliant adaptation to a world where the sun refused to follow the rules. Now travel from the endless light and dark of the poles to the vast, open deserts of the Arabian Peninsula or the Sahara. Here, the challenge was not a lack of celestial cues, but a lack of any other reference points. The featureless, shifting dunes made terrestrial navigation nearly impossible, but it offered an unparalleled advantage: incredibly clear, dark, and unobstructed views of the night sky. For the Bedouin traders who guided their caravans across these seas of sand, the stars were their only reliable map and clock. They developed an intricate knowledge of the heavens, memorizing the rising and setting of specific stars to mark the watches of the night. The passage of a constellation across a particular point in the sky would indicate how many hours of darkness remained before dawn. This was critical for planning travel during the cooler night hours and for knowing when to stop and make camp. The desert also imposed its own daily rhythm based on the brutal sun. The day was divided not into equal hours but into practical segments. The cool early morning was for travel, the scorching midday was for rest and shade, and the evening was for renewal and social life. The desert clock was a pragmatic one, governed by the necessity of avoiding heat stroke and navigating by the only fixed points available: the countless stars overhead. Coastal communities around the world, from the Polynesian islands we've already explored to the fishing villages of medieval Europe, lived by a rhythm entirely unique to their environment: the tides. The relentless, predictable push and pull of the ocean, governed by the gravitational dance of the moon and sun, created a powerful twice-daily pulse that overrode the solar day. For these cultures, a calendar that only tracked the sun was only half the story. The most important question was not, "What hour is it?" But is the tide coming in or going out? And is it a high spring tide or a low neap tide? The tidal clock dictated all aspects of life. It determined when fishermen could launch their boats and return with their catch, when it was safe to cross a coastal land bridge, when to gather shellfish from exposed rocks, and even when to attack or defend a seaside settlement. In places like Britain, ancient tidally calendars have been found, marking the progression of high tides throughout the lunar month. This created a binatural rhythm, a solar day for the general routine, superimposed with a stronger tidal cycle for maritime activities. Their concept of time was literally fluid, ebbing and flowing with the sea itself. Finally, look to the rugged terrain of mountainous regions like the Alps or the Andes. Here, the dramatic topography itself became a timekeeping device. The sun would appear over a specific eastern peak at dawn and disappear behind a western ridge at dusk, its light and shadow painting a daily story across the valley walls. Villagers would learn to tell time by these shadow movements. The moment the sun hit the highest waterfall, signaling the start of the morning's work, the time when the shadow of a particular pinnacle touched a certain field, indicating it was time to return home. These were hyper-local time zones, understood only by the people who lived in that specific valley. Furthermore, the extreme altitude and clear air of mountains, much like the desert, made for exceptional stellar observation. The Inca, for example, built their pillars and towers on the hills surrounding Cusco not just for solstice markers, but to create precise sightlines for tracking the movement of stars and planets against the sharp, black silhouette of the Andean peaks. The mountains provided a natural, monumental gnomon and a fixed backdrop, turning the entire landscape into a colossal astronomical observatory. This incredible geographical diversity proves that timekeeping was never a one-size-fits-all invention. It was a dialogue between human ingenuity and the natural world, a testament to our ability to find order and meaning in whatever environment we call home, using the language of the land itself to speak the time. But the steady drip of water, the silent fall of sand, and even the predictable burning of a candle still shared a fundamental connection to the natural world. They measured time through the consumption of a physical substance. The true revolution, the great divorce between human time and earthly elements, began in the bustling, rising cities of medieval Europe. Here, in the second half of the 13th century, a transformative invention began to tick: the mechanical clock. This was not merely an improvement on existing devices, it was an entirely new paradigm. The earliest of these marvels were massive, weight-driven machines, often installed in the bell towers of monasteries and cathedrals. Their power came from a heavy weight suspended on a rope wound around a drum. As gravity pulled the weight downward, it turned the drum, and this energy was regulated by a crucial, ingenious component called the verge escapement, a swinging foliot that released the gear train tooth by tooth, creating the characteristic tick-tock sound that would become the heartbeat of the modern world. This escapement mechanism was the true breakthrough, replacing the continuous flow of water or sand with an oscillating mechanical heartbeat that could be counted, standardized, and made incredibly precise. This technological leap was not an isolated event. It was both a cause and a symptom of a profound cultural shift sweeping across Europe. Society was becoming more urbanized, with growing towns and cities where trade and commerce were rapidly expanding. In this new environment, the old, fluid time of the fields measured by the length of a shadow or the crowing of a rooster was no longer sufficient. Merchants needed to coordinate market hours, guilds needed to regulate the working day for apprentices, and a growing literate class began to schedule meetings and correspondence. Time was slowly being transformed from a natural rhythm experienced by all into a commodity that could be measured, bought, and sold. the mechanical clock was the perfect engine for this new worldview. It allowed for the concept of standardized hours of equal length regardless of the season, a stark departure from the temporary, unequal hours of the sundial that stretched and shrank with the changing daylight. This was the beginning of clock time, an abstract, uniform grid that could be imposed upon daily life, creating a shared, objective schedule that everyone in a community could follow. The most visible and audible symbol of this new order was the public clock tower, which began to dominate the skylines of European cities in the 14th century. These towers did more than tell time, they announced it. Their great bells would ring out on the hour, marking the time for prayer, for the opening of the city gates, for the start of the workday, and for the nightly curfew. The sound of the clock bell became the rhythm of civic life, a sound that reached into every workshop, home, and street, synchronizing the activities of thousands of people. This shared public time fostered a new sense of collective identity and efficiency, enabling a scale of organization previously unimaginable. It facilitated the complex scheduling required for long-distance trade, the coordination of municipal services, and the rigorous daily routine of monastic orders. The clock tower was a declaration of a city's sophistication and order, a tangible representation of its control over the very flow of time itself. This newfound precision had a ripple effect that extended far beyond the marketplace or the town square. It began to reshape the human mind. The ability to measure time in smaller, more consistent increments was a prerequisite for the scientific revolution that would soon follow. How could Galileo accurately study the motion of a pendulum, or Newton formulate his laws of motion without a reliable way to measure fleeting intervals? The mechanical clock provided the temporal framework that made experimental science possible, turning qualitative observation into quantitative, repeatable data. It encouraged a new way of thinking about the universe not as a living, organic entity, but as a great mechanical machine operating by predictable mathematical laws, a concept that mirrored the clockwork ticking away in the town square. Yet, this incredible progress came with a profound and often overlooked cost, a growing schism between human life and the natural world. For millennia, our sense of time had been woven into the fabric of the environment, the warmth of the sun, the phase of the moon, the migration of birds. Time was local, fluid, and deeply personal. The mechanical clock replaced this organic rhythm with an artificial, abstract, and relentless pulse. The workday was no longer defined by the task at hand or the available light, but by the clock on the wall. Time became something to be spent, saved, wasted, or lost. This regimentation created new forms of discipline and anxiety, distancing us from the intuitive, cyclical time of our ancestors and launching us into the age of schedules, deadlines, and the constant, pressure-filled awareness of the ticking clock. We gained unparalleled coordination and precision, but we began to lose our innate sense of being in time, trading a harmonious relationship with nature's cycles for the demanding, metronomic beat of the machine. Yet this new mechanical precision, for all its power to coordinate and commodify, makes us wonder about the world we left behind. The pre-clock era was not one of chaos or imprecision, but of a different kind of order, an order where time was not a universal constant to be imposed, but a social agreement to be negotiated and a spiritual force to be appeased. The measurement of time was never a neutral, technical exercise. It was a profound social act, a tool that could bind a community together or consolidate immense power in the hands of a few. In a world without a central, objective clock, the very definition of time itself was a form of social currency, and those who controlled its definition held the keys to coordinating human activity on a massive scale. This control over chronology became one of the oldest and most subtle forms of authority, shaping everything from religious practice to economic life. Consider the immense power vested in the ancient Roman priesthood, particularly the pontifices. These were not merely holy men, they were the master timekeepers of the Republic. Their most crucial duty was to observe the night sky and declare the sighting of the first thin crescent of the new moon. This official proclamation, the Kalendii, marked the first day of the new month in the Roman calendar. But their authority did not end there. The Roman calendar was a messy, lunar-based system that constantly fell out of sync with the solar year. To correct this drift, the pontifices had the sole power to intercalate, to insert an extra month, Mercedonius, into the year. This was not a decision made on a fixed scientific schedule. It was often a deeply political one. A pontifex friendly to a consul whose term was ending could shorten the year, effectively cutting his time in office short. Conversely, they could lengthen the year to extend the term of a favored official or delay elections. The calendar was a malleable tool of governance, and the priests who wielded it held the power to literally reshape time to serve the interests of the state and its elite. For the average Roman citizen, time was not something they owned or measured for themselves. It was something that was announced to them, a rhythm dictated from above that structured their debts, their festivals, and their obligations. This model of centralized chronological control was repeated in countless ancient civilizations. In China, the emperor ruled under the mandate of heaven, and a critical part of that mandate was the responsibility to maintain an accurate calendar. The Imperial Astronomical Bureau employed teams of mathematicians and astrologers to observe the heavens and calculate the official calendar. This document was then promulgated throughout the vast empire. To follow the emperor's calendar was a fundamental act of loyalty and submission. To use a different calendar was an act of rebellion. The accurate prediction of eclipses and solstices was not just a scientific achievement but a political necessity. It proved the emperor was in harmony with the cosmos and retained heaven's favor. The calendar was a powerful symbol of unity, synchronizing agricultural cycles, tax collection, and religious ceremonies across millions of people and thousands of miles, all under the centralized authority of the Son of Heaven. Yet, operating alongside these top-down systems of control was a more organic, grassroots form of timekeeping that served to strengthen communities from the bottom up. This was the time of the agricultural calendar, a rhythm dictated not by priests or emperors, but by the land itself and the collective labor it required. In a pre-industrial village, the year was not a list of months on a page but a sequence of shared tasks. The entire community knew that when the first specific star rose before dawn, it was time to prepare the plows. When a particular tree blossomed, it was time for the whole village to move up to the high pastures for summer grazing. The harvest was not an individual endeavor but a collective sprint against the weather, requiring every able body to work together in the fields. This shared environmental schedule created a powerful sense of communal solidarity and mutual dependence. Your neighbor's ability to measure the signs of the season correctly was as important to your survival as your own. This communal timekeeping found its highest expression in the seasonal festival. These were not just parties, they were essential chronological anchor points that reinforced social bonds and cultural identity. The Celtic festival of Samhain, marking the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter, was a time when the veil between worlds was thought to be thin. It was a moment for the community to come together, to appease spirits, to settle debts, and to prepare collectively for the dark months ahead. In ancient Greece, the Thesmophoria, a festival dedicated to Demeter, was organized and attended exclusively by women. It was a 3-day event that temporarily inverted social norms. giving women a rare and powerful communal space to conduct rituals that were believed to ensure the fertility of the crops and, by extension, the survival of the entire polis. These festivals, timed by natural signs and celestial events, were the glue that held societies together. They transformed the abstract passage of time into a shared emotional experience, a time for grief, for celebration, for remembrance, or for hope. They embedded the calendar into the very heart of cultural memory, ensuring that the knowledge of when to plant, when to harvest, and when to celebrate was passed down through generations not as a dry fact, but as a living story. In this way, the measurement of time became inseparable from the values, the fears, and the very identity of the people who measured it, proving that the clock, long before it was ever built, was always a profoundly social invention. But if the grand mechanical clocks of medieval Europe represented a new form of social control, the ancient world wielded an even more profound tool for shaping humanity's relationship with time: the power of story. Long before the first gear was cut or the first escapement mechanism ticked, our ancestors were using mythology to explain the very origins of time itself, weaving intricate narratives that transformed the cold, mechanical movements of the heavens into a grand divine drama. These stories were far more than simple entertainment. They were the original frameworks for scientific observation, the vehicles for preserving complex knowledge, and the emotional bridge that connected human fear and wonder to the vast, impersonal cosmos. In a world without textbooks, the myth was the manual, and the oral tradition was the hard drive that stored humanity's earliest chronological data. Consider the ancient Egyptians gazing up each day at the relentless journey of the sun. They didn't see a mere ball of fiery gas following the laws of physics. They witnessed the sun god Ra embarking on his daily voyage of rebirth, death, and resurrection. Each morning he was Khepri, the scarab beetle, pushing the sun above the eastern horizon. At zenith, he was the powerful, mature god Ra, shining at his full strength. And as he descended into the west, he transformed into the aged autumn, traveling through the terrifying 12-hour underworld of the night, battling the serpent god Apophis, who sought to stop his journey and plunge the world into eternal darkness. His triumphant rebirth at dawn was never guaranteed. It required the nightly rituals of the Egyptian priests to ensure his victory and the sun's return. This magnificent story did more than just explain why the sun rose and set. It directly mirrored their tripartite calendar of flood, emergence, and harvest. It infused the daily solar cycle with high-stakes meaning, making the measurement of time the hours of the night that Ra spent in peril, a sacred duty essential for the very continuation of creation. The calendar wasn't just a tool, it was a script for participating in this divine struggle. Across the Mediterranean, the ancient Greeks developed their own celestial narratives, though with a different flavor. Their sun god, Helios, drove a fiery chariot across the sky each day, a concept that beautifully captured the sun's predictable, path-like journey along the ecliptic. His wayward son, Phaethon, who foolishly lost control of the chariot and scorched the earth, served as a mythical explanation for the existence of the deserts of Africa and the dark skin of its people, a tale that connected a catastrophic, past celestial event to the present geography and ethnography of their known world. Similarly, the story of the goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone provided a heartbreakingly beautiful explanation for the seasons. When Hades abducted Persephone to the underworld, Demeter's grief plunged the world into the barren cold of winter. Her joy upon Persephone's annual return brought forth the spring and summer. This narrative perfectly encapsulated the emotional experience of the agricultural cycle, the anxiety of winter and the jubilant relief of the harvest, while also encoding the timing of the solstices and equinoxes into a memorable, emotional story that every Greek child would learn. The myth was the mnemonic device that preserved the calendar. This practice of embedding astronomical data into folklore was a global phenomenon, a universal human technology for knowledge preservation. The indigenous peoples of Australia, who possess the oldest continuous culture on Earth, use the song lines of their Dreamtime stories. These are not just myths, they are intricate oral maps of the land that also encode astronomical knowledge. A song might describe the journey of an ancestral creator being, and the specific places mentioned in the verse correspond to actual geographical features, while the actions of the being describe the movement of stars and planets across the landscape. By singing the song in the correct sequence, they could navigate vast distances across the featureless outback, and the same song would also tell them what time of year it was based on the celestial events described. The story was the map, the calendar, and the navigation manual, all fused into one. In this way, mythology was the ultimate preservation system. Before writing, complex information could be lost in a single generation. But a compelling story filled with drama, heroes, monsters, and moral lessons is unforgettable. It ensures that the crucial knowledge of when the Pleiades will rise or when the monsoon rains should begin is passed down not as a dry list of facts, but as a beloved cultural treasure, sung around campfires for thousands of years. This deep intertwining of myth and measurement reveals something fundamental about the human psyche. We have never been satisfied with simply knowing how time works. We have always needed to know why. We crave meaning and narrative. A lunar eclipse is not just the Earth's shadow falling on the moon. To the ancient Chinese, it was a celestial dragon trying to devour the moon, and they would bang pots and drums to scare it away. The phases of the moon weren't just a cycle of illumination. To countless cultures, they were the monthly death and rebirth of a god, or the changing mood of a lunar deity. These stories transformed the terrifying, unknowable vastness of time and space into something familiar, something with intention and emotion behind it. They gave people a role to play, to perform a ritual, say a prayer, or sing a song that could influence these cosmic events. This provided a sense of control and comfort in a seemingly chaotic universe. The myth gave the measurement its heart, and the measurement gave the myth its structure. Together, they satisfied both the logical and the emotional halves of the human mind, creating a complete cosmology where every tick of the celestial clock was also a beat in the heart of a god. It's easy to look at our sleek digital watches and smartphones and feel utterly disconnected from the ancient past, as if our precise, globalized time is a completely modern invention. But the truth is, we are still living by rules written in the stars and carved into clay tablets thousands of years ago. The legacy of pre-clock timekeeping isn't just a historical curiosity. It's woven into the very fabric of our daily schedules, our geography, and even the way we perceive the world. Every time you glance at your clock and see that it's 3:15, you are inadvertently paying homage to the mathematical genius of ancient Babylonian astronomers. Their fascination with the number 60, a sexagesimal system, is the sole reason we have 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. They chose 60 because it's a highly composite number, easily divisible by so many other numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. This made complex astronomical calculations and fractions much simpler to work with long before the invention of the decimal point. That same base 60 system is why we have 360 degrees in a circle, a convention that has defined navigation, geometry, and our understanding of the celestial sphere for millennia. This wasn't a random choice, it was a stroke of mathematical brilliance that has proven so effective, we've never felt the need to replace it. Our calendar is another living museum of ancient timekeeping. The very names of our months, July and August, named for Roman emperors Julius and Augustus Caesar, and September, October, November, and December retaining their original Latin names as the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th months despite now being the 9th through 12th, are a direct echo of the Roman calendar's complex and politically motivated history. The messy, uneven lengths of our months, which we still struggle to memorize with rhymes, are a fossilized remnant of earlier lunar cycles and later imperial tinkering. Even our 7-day week is a powerful inheritance, a blend of the Babylonian association of days with the 7 moving celestial bodies they could observe: the sun, the moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn, and the Judeo-Christian tradition of a Sabbath day of rest. This weekly cycle, divorced from any clear astronomical phenomenon like a month or a year, has proven to be one of the most enduring and universal human inventions for structuring social and economic life. Perhaps the most pervasive, yet invisible, legacy is the concept of time zones. Before the railroads necessitated standardized time in the 19th century, every town and village operated on its own local solar time. Noon was simply when the sun reached its highest point in the sky directly overhead. This meant that a clock in a city just 50 miles west would be a few minutes behind. This system worked perfectly fine for local life, but created chaos for anyone trying to run trains on a schedule across long distances. The global solution was to create time zones, which are essentially wide longitudinal strips where everyone agrees to use the same time, usually based on the solar time of a central meridian. So, while we now follow an artificial, coordinated clock, the system is still fundamentally built upon that ancient, universal practice of using the sun's position to define the day. The clock on your wall may be synchronized with millions of others, but its underlying principle that the middle of the day should roughly align with the sun's highest point is a direct handshake with every ancient culture that ever raised a gnomon or watched a shadow lengthen. This enduring influence is a powerful testament to the ingenuity of our ancestors. They weren't primitive, they were pioneering scientists and mathematicians who developed systems of astonishing elegance and durability. Their solutions were so robust, so perfectly tailored to human need and natural observation, that they have seamlessly integrated into the digital age. We don't question why an hour has 60 minutes any more than we question why a circle has 360 degrees. It just works. Recognizing this deep history transforms our relationship with time from one of simple utility to one of appreciation. Every second that ticks by is part of a continuum of human curiosity, a story of our relentless drive to map the heavens, organize our societies, and ultimately understand our place in the vast, turning cosmos. The past isn't past, it's ticking away on your wrist, a constant reminder that we stand on the shoulders of celestial giants. Yet for all their profound ingenuity, the ancient world's pursuit of precise time was a constant battle against the inherent limitations of nature and technology. Imagine the frustration of a Babylonian priest tasked with maintaining the sacred calendar, knowing that despite his meticulous observations, the lunar months he so carefully counted would slowly but surely drift out of alignment with the solar seasons he depended upon for agriculture. This fundamental mismatch between the moon's 29.5-day cycle and the sun's 365-day journey was perhaps the most persistent headache for early chronologists. A purely lunar calendar, like the one still used in Islam, completes its year in about 354 days, falling short of the solar year by 11 days. This meant that without correction, a festival celebrating the spring harvest would, within just a few years, be occurring in the dead of winter. The solution, the Intercalary month, was a brilliant fix, but it was also a cumbersome one. Deciding exactly when to insert this extra month was a weighty responsibility, often left to ruling elites or priestly classes, and it was a process vulnerable to human error, political manipulation, or simply a lack of clear astronomical data due to prolonged bad weather. Time itself became a flexible concept, subject to revision and debate, a far cry from the immutable, universal seconds we take for granted today. Beyond the celestial drift, the very tools of the trade were frustratingly fragile. The mighty sundial, a monument to solar precision, was rendered utterly useless the moment a cloud passed over the sun or when night fell. A sudden rainstorm could wash away the carefully drawn hour lines in the dirt, while a portable sundial carried on a journey would provide different readings based on latitude, making it impossible to synchronize time between distant cities. The water clock, or clepsydra, offered a solution for telling time indoors or at night, but it introduced a whole new set of problems. The flow of water is notoriously sensitive to temperature. On a cold night, the water could thicken or even freeze, slowing the drip to a crawl, while on a hot day, evaporation could subtly alter the water level and skew the measurement. The device's accuracy also depended on maintaining a perfectly clean, unclogged outlet and a constant water pressure, which decreased as the upper reservoir emptied. This meant even the most advanced water clocks required constant supervision, cleaning, and recalibration by a dedicated attendant, making them impractical for widespread, independent use. This lack of portability and standardization meant that time itself was a deeply local experience. The time in one Egyptian city might be several minutes different from a city just a short journey down the Nile, as each place set its clocks by its own local solar noon. There was no concept of a coordinated universal time. Instead, there were countless micro-times, each valid only within its own immediate context. This made long-distance coordination incredibly difficult. A merchant traveling from Rome to Alexandria would have to continuously adjust his personal timekeeping devices and his internal schedule, never quite sure if an appointment made in one city would be honored at the same moment in another. The very definition of an hour could change with the seasons. The temporary hours of a sundial, where daylight was divided into 12 equal parts, meant a summer hour was significantly longer than a winter hour. This fluid, context-dependent time was perfectly suited to agrarian societies governed by the sun, but it created immense friction as trade, administration, and scientific inquiry began to demand greater synchronization across wider distances. Ultimately, these limitations forced ancient inventors to become masters of compromise and adaptation. They understood that their devices provided not absolute precision, but a useful approximation. A sundial might be corrected with written tables that accounted for the time of year. A water clock might be designed with a conical interior to compensate for the dropping water pressure. The very imprecision of their tools fostered a different relationship with time itself, one that was more fluid, more integrated with natural cycles, and perhaps less anxiety-ridden than our modern obsession with nanosecond accuracy. The struggle against these challenges wasn't a sign of failure, it was the engine of innovation. Each limitation pushed them to experiment, to refine, and to dream of a more perfect timekeeper, slowly laying the foundational stones that would eventually lead to the mechanical escapement and the relentless, standardized tick of the modern clock. Their battle against the elements was a testament to human perseverance, a centuries-long project to wrestle order from the beautiful, but often inconvenient, chaos of the natural world. Yet while the grand astronomical observations and the invention of complex devices like the clepsydra often dominate the historical record, a vast, silent, and deeply practical world of timekeeping was unfolding simultaneously within the home, the field, and the sacred spaces of daily life, a world where women were the principal chronologists. Their role was not recorded on stone stelae or in official annals, but it was absolutely foundational, woven into the very fabric of survival and cultural continuity. In the domestic sphere, the rhythm of the day was not dictated by the hourglass or the sundial, but by the knowledge passed from mother to daughter, a living almanac of tasks timed to the subtle cues of the natural world. The success of a household depended on this expertise. A woman knew precisely when to start the daily bread making so it would be ready by the evening meal, a process timed by the consistency of the sourdough starter and the warmth of the sun on the kitchen stones. She understood the exact point in the day when the light was perfect for detailed weaving or embroidery, and she scheduled the grinding of grain, the churning of butter, and the preparation of herbs for medicine based on a deep, ingrained sense of duration and season that was every bit as sophisticated as any official calendar. This mastery extended far beyond the walls of the home into the heart of agriculture. In countless subsistence societies across the globe, women were the primary cultivators of staple crops. This responsibility made them acute observers of phonology, the study of cyclic and seasonal natural phenomena. Their eyes were trained to detect the most minuscule changes in the environment that signaled it was time to act. The specific angle of the sunlight on a particular hill, the first unfurling of a certain leaf, the arrival of a particular species of bird or insect, these were the indicators that governed the planting of seeds, the tending of young plants, and the harvesting of grains. In many Native American cultures, such as the Three Sisters agricultural system practiced by the Iroquois and others, women were solely responsible for the cultivation of corn, beans, and squash. Their knowledge dictated that corn must be planted when the oak leaves were the size of a squirrel's ear, a beautifully precise natural marker that was far more reliable than any fixed date on a parchment calendar. They were the ones who watched the stage of the moon to determine the optimal time for harvesting medicinal plants, believing that the potency of roots and herbs was tied to the lunar cycle. This wasn't mere superstition, it was empirical science born from generations of meticulous observation and hands-on experience. This profound connection to biological and lunar cycles naturally elevated women to the role of keepers of lunar knowledge in many cultures. The approximate 29.5-day cycle of the moon mirrors the average human menstrual cycle, creating a powerful symbolic and practical link between women's bodies and the celestial timekeeper. This association was not lost on ancient societies, who often saw this parallel as evidence of a deep, sacred connection. In numerous traditions, women were the organizers and leaders of rituals tied to the new moon and full moon, ceremonies that focused on purification, fertility, and community blessing. Their monthly cycles, synchronized with the moon's phases, were not hidden or stigmatized but were often respected as a period of heightened spiritual power and intuitive knowledge. In these cultures, women became the living calendars, their own biology a reliable clock that governed the timing of communal rituals, the scheduling of marriages, and the planning for conception and birth. They held the knowledge of which moon phase was best for planting root crops versus leafy greens, or for beginning a new creative project. This made them indispensable advisors in their communities, the human interface between the celestial rhythm above and the human rhythm below. The story of the Minoan civilization on ancient Crete offers a tantalizing glimpse into how this might have functioned at a societal level. the extensive frescoes and artifacts unearthed at palaces like Knossos prominently feature women in positions of religious authority, often depicted in scenes of ritual and procession. Many archaeologists and historians theorize that Minoan society may have been matrifocal, with women playing a central role in religious life. It is highly plausible that these priestesses were the chief timekeepers, responsible for maintaining the lunar calendar that would have governed the schedule of festivals, offerings, and sacred ceremonies dedicated to their powerful goddesses. Their role would have been to observe the moon, declare the beginnings of new months, and ensure that the sacred cycle of time remained unbroken, directly linking their authority to the fundamental ordering of the cosmos itself. Recognizing these multifaceted contributions completely transforms our understanding of ancient chronology. It moves the narrative away from a singular focus on male astronomers, priests, and engineers, and reveals timekeeping as a truly collaborative, society-wide effort. The official, monumental calendar maintained by the state for taxation and ritual existed alongside, and was utterly dependent upon, the intimate, localized timekeeping practiced by women. The pharaoh's priests could not have predicted the Nile's flood without the celestial knowledge, but the farmers could not have survived without the daily, seasonal wisdom applied by the women in the fields and homes. This division of chronological labor was not a hierarchy of importance but a partnership of necessity. It demonstrates that the human quest to measure time was never just about grand ambition or controlling nature. It was, at its core, about the practical, daily work of nurturing life, ensuring the meal was ready, the crops were sown at the right moment, and the community remained in harmony with the deep, enduring rhythms of the earth and the sky. The story of time is incomplete without acknowledging the half of humanity who watched, learned, and measured from the heart of the home. While the sundials of Rome and the water clocks of China represent incredible feats of engineering across the Atlantic Ocean, in the magnificent isolation of the Americas, civilizations were developing their own breathtakingly sophisticated and entirely independent conceptions of time. Far from being primitive, cultures like the Maya and the Inca engineered chronological systems that were not merely tools for tracking days, but entire cosmologies carved in stone and woven into the very landscape itself. Their approach to time was holistic, viewing its passage not as a linear march but as a sacred, cyclical process of death and rebirth, where the careful measurement of celestial cycles was the key to maintaining the balance of the cosmos and ensuring the continued existence of their world. The Maya, in particular, were arguably the most avid timekeepers of the ancient world, developing a system of such complexity and precision that it still inspires awe today. At the heart of their temporal universe was not one calendar, but three, each operating simultaneously like interlocking gears in a grand cosmic machine. The first, the Hob, was a practical solar calendar of 365 days, divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus a short, ominous 5-day period known as the Wayeb. This was the calendar that governed the agricultural cycle, the seasons, and secular ceremonies. Running concurrently was the Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred calendar comprised of 20-day names combined with the numbers 1 through 13. This was not a measure of the solar year, but a divinatory tool. Each unique combination of a number and a day sign carried its own spiritual energy, omen, and patron deity. Maya priests would use the Tzolk'in to determine the most auspicious days for everything from planting crops and going to war to naming a child and holding a wedding. It was a perpetual almanac of fate, weaving time and spirituality into an inseparable whole, but the crown jewel of Maya timekeeping was the long count. This was not a repeating cycle like the others, but a linear, continuous tally of days from a fixed, mythical starting point that scholars believe corresponds to August 11th, 3114 BCE in our Gregorian calendar, the date the Maya considered the birth of the current world era. The long count counted forward in nested cycles. 20 Kayan's days made a winnel, 18 winnels made a ton, a 360-day year, 20 tons made a kayaton, and 20 kayatons made a bakton, a period of 144,000 days, or roughly 394 years. This system allowed them to record historical events with pinpoint accuracy for thousands of years into the past and future. The completion of a full 13 bakton cycle, approximately 5,125 years, was a moment of immense cosmic significance, marking the end of one world age and the beginning of another. This belief in cyclical creation and destruction was fundamental. Time itself had a lifespan, and it was the duty of humanity, through precise ritual and calendar keeping, to ensure the cycle would renew itself. High in the Andes Mountains, the Inca Empire developed a profoundly different, yet equally brilliant, approach to celestial timekeeping. Without a written language as we know it, they encoded their knowledge not in codices, but in the architecture of their capital city and the surrounding sacred landscape. At the heart of their system was the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, which functioned as the cosmological center of their universe. Radiating out from this temple like spokes on a wheel were 41 invisible lines called sects. Along these sects were hundreds of sacred shrines or huacas, which included natural features like springs and caves, as well as man-made structures. The most important of these shrines for timekeeping were the Pillars of the Sun. On the horizon surrounding the Cusco Valley, the Inca constructed a series of tall stone towers. By observing the sun's rising and setting positions from the central Coricancha temple, priests could track its movement against these pillars. On the June solstice, the sun would rise directly between two specific pillars, signaling the start of the year and the Inti Raymi festival, a celebration of the sun god that involved sacrifices and prayers to ensure his return and the renewal of the agricultural cycle. Similarly, the December solstice and the equinoxes were marked with equal precision. This transformed the entire valley into a massive, open-air observatory. The city itself was a clock, and the horizon was its dial. This practice of embedding astronomy into the geography is known as astroarchaeology or landscape astronomy, and it demonstrates a genius for using the natural environment as a permanent, unchanging reference point for measuring the fleeting passage of time. The purpose of these incredibly accurate systems was far more profound than simple scheduling. For both the Maya and the Inca, precise timekeeping was the very mechanism of governance and survival. A Maya king's legitimacy was proven by his ability to accurately predict celestial events like eclipses or the transit of Venus. By announcing that on a specific long count date a certain event would occur, and then having it happen, he demonstrated his divine connection and his role as the mediator between the people and the gods. His power was quite literally written in the stars. For the Inca, the Sapa Inca was the son of the sun god Inti. His control over the calendar, which dictated the timing of planting, harvest, and religious festivals, was absolute proof of his divinity. By correctly predicting the solstices, he proved his ability to command the sun itself, ensuring the fertility of the land and the prosperity of the empire. The calendar was the ultimate tool of social and political control, synchronizing the labor of millions of people across a vast and rugged empire through the Mitta system of public service, all organized around the celestial schedule decreed from Cusco. This distinct approach reveals a world where time was not a resource to be spent, but a sacred, repeating pattern to be honored. The Maya belief in cyclical world ages and the Inca rituals ensuring the sun's return both speak to a concept of time that valued renewal and cosmic harmony above all else. Their incredible innovations, the Maya's complex mathematical long count and the Inca's giant horizon calendar, were not just scientific achievements, they were profound spiritual acts. They represent humanity's enduring desire to find our place within the cosmos, to participate in its rhythms, and to ensure, through careful observation and reverent practice, that the great cycle of time would continue to turn. But who ultimately controlled these magnificent celestial calendars and intricate devices? The answer reveals one of the oldest and most potent secrets of governance. The measurement of time is never neutral. In the ancient world, the power to declare what time it was, to define the calendar, and to schedule the rhythms of life was a source of authority as formidable as any army. This was because timekeeping was far more than a technical skill. It was the ultimate tool for legitimizing rule, organizing society, and imposing discipline, transforming abstract chronology into a powerful engine of social and political control. Consider the immense authority wielded by the imperial astronomers in ancient China. The emperor ruled under the mandate of heaven, a concept that meant his right to govern was divinely granted, but it could also be withdrawn. A critical part of proving he retained this mandate was his responsibility to maintain a perfectly accurate calendar. The Imperial Astronomical Bureau was a state-sponsored institution where teams of brilliant mathematicians and astrologers worked to observe the heavens, predict eclipses, and calculate the official calendar. This document was then promulgated with great ceremony throughout the vast empire. For a provincial governor or a local farmer to use this official calendar was a fundamental act of loyalty and submission. To follow a rival's calendar was tantamount to treason. The accurate prediction of a solar eclipse was not just a scientific achievement, it was a political necessity. If the emperor's astronomers failed to predict it, it was seen as a sign that the cosmos was out of alignment with his rule, that he had lost the mandate of heaven, potentially sparking rebellion. By controlling the calendar, the emperor demonstrated his unique role as the intermediary between the celestial order and the human world, making time itself a proof of his divinity. This model of chronological control was mirrored on the other side of the world, though in a vastly different context, the medieval European monastery. Here, the objective was not political legitimacy in an empire, but spiritual discipline within a closed community. Before the widespread adoption of mechanical clocks, the monastic day was regimented by the divine office, a cycle of 8 canonical hours of prayer that structured the entire 24-hour period. These prayers, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline, were not scheduled by the sun alone, but were announced by the ringing of bells, often timed by water clocks, candle clocks, or later, mechanical clocks. This constant auditory marking of time served a profound purpose. It broke the day into a relentless rhythm of worship and work, leaving no room for idleness or individual desire. The bell would ring, and the monk would immediately stop whatever he was doing, whether copying a manuscript, working in the garden, or sleeping, to proceed to the chapel for prayer. This discipline, this utter submission to a scheduled divine order, was seen as a path to spiritual perfection. The monastery became a machine for salvation, and its clock was the key component, inculcating a new, internalized sense of punctuality and obedience that would eventually seep out into the secular world. The power derived from controlling time also had brutally practical economic and military applications. Across ancient empires, the calendar was the essential framework for taxation. In Egypt, the predictable flooding of the Nile dictated the agricultural cycle, which in turn dictated when taxes often paid in grain were to be collected. The state's ability to accurately predict the harvest and announce tax collection dates was a direct exercise of its power to extract wealth from its citizens. Similarly, in ancient Rome, the calendar designated specific days called dies fasti, when it was legally permissible to conduct business in the courts and the marketplace. By controlling this schedule, the state could regulate economic activity and the administration of justice. Militarily, the ability to synchronize was a force multiplier. Coordinating the movement of armies across vast distances, ensuring that separate legions would converge on a battlefield at the exact same time, or launching a surprise attack at a predetermined moment required a shared, reliable understanding of time. The state that could best tell time could best marshal its resources, outmaneuver its enemies, and project its power across continents. In this way, the calendar was as crucial to a general's strategy as his maps and his soldiers. Ultimately, this interplay between time and power shaped the very consciousness of ancient peoples. By controlling the calendar, rulers and priests did not just tell people what to do. They told them when to do it, and more importantly, they told them why now was the right time. They embedded their authority into the most fundamental rhythm of life: the rising sun, the changing moon, the turning season. The calendar scheduled moments of collective effervescence during public festivals, reinforcing cultural identity and loyalty to the crown. It also created moments of shared anxiety, like the 5 unlucky days at the end of the Aztec year, which required state-sponsored rituals to avert disaster. This control over time created a form of social cohesion that was incredibly difficult to break. To rebel against the king was not just to rebel against a man, it was to rebel against the very order of the cosmos he claimed to represent. The clock and the calendar were never merely tools for measurement. They were the silent, ticking heart of ancient power structures, instruments that carved order from chaos, and in doing so, taught entire civilizations to march to the beat of a single, sanctioned drum. But the drive to measure time, to build calendars and engineer clocks, inevitably leads to a deeper, more haunting question that has puzzled humanity for millennia. What is time, really? Is it a river flowing inexorably from a definite past toward an unknown future? Or is it a great wheel eternally turning, where every event is destined to repeat itself again and again? This was not a question for astronomers or engineers alone. It was the domain of philosophers, and in the bustling agoras of ancient Greece, some of the greatest minds to ever live began a debate that would echo through the centuries, fundamentally shaping how entire civilizations would come to perceive the very fabric of existence. In the 4th century BC, the philosopher Plato offered a truly visionary answer. He proposed that time itself was a moving, albeit imperfect, image of eternity. Imagine a perfect, unchanging, and eternal realm of ideal forms the abstract perfect concepts of everything from justice to a circle. Our physical world, according to Plato, is just a flawed copy of this perfect realm. Time, he argued, is the mechanism by which this imperfect physical world moves and changes, trying and always failing to mimic the static perfection of eternity. For Plato, time was created by a divine craftsman as part of structuring the ordered cosmos. This meant time had a beginning, but it would likely continue in a steady, uniform flow. His student, Aristotle, took a far more practical and analytical approach. He looked at time not as a spiritual concept, but as a measurable aspect of change itself. His famous definition was that time is the number of change with respect to before and after. In simpler terms, we perceive time only because we perceive change, the movement of the sun, the aging of our bodies, the burning of a candle. Without change, there would be no time. Aristotle questioned whether time could exist independently of a human mind to count and measure that change, pondering if it was a real feature of the universe or just a construct of our perception. While he leaned toward a linear view of time, his work laid the groundwork for both sides of the debate. This philosophical split had direct and profound consequences for how societies structured their lives and their histories. The Greek view, particularly through Aristotle, heavily influenced the Roman world and later Judeo-Christian thought, cementing a linear concept of time in the West. This is the idea of time as an arrow. It has a definitive starting point, the creation, and it is hurtling toward a final, teleological endpoint, often envisioned as a day of judgment or a messianic age. This linear perspective inherently values progress, history, and legacy. It creates a narrative where events are unique and unrepeatable, which encourages the keeping of detailed historical records, the idea of scientific and social advancement, and a focus on the future. Your place in time matters because you are part of an ongoing, singular story. Travel eastward, however, and you find a completely different temporal landscape, one dominated by the majestic, dizzying concept of the cycle. In Hinduism, time is understood through vast, almost incomprehensible cycles called kalpas. A single kalpa, a day in the life of the god Brahma, lasts over 4 billion human years. This day is itself divided into periods, and at the end of each kalpa, the universe is dissolved and reabsorbed into Brahma, only to be created anew when he awakens. This cycle of creation, preservation, and destruction, symbolized by the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, repeats without beginning and without end. Similarly, Buddhism adopted this cyclical view, framing it within the context of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth that beings are trapped in until they achieve enlightenment and break free into nirvana. Here, time is not moving toward a final climax. It is a rotating stage upon which the same fundamental dramas of existence play out eternally. The goal is not to progress forward in time, but to escape the wheel entirely. This philosophical divergence is not some abstract academic exercise. It is etched into the very calendars and rituals these cultures produced. A culture with a linear worldview, like the Christian West, creates a calendar that is a numbered count forward from a pivotal historical event, the birth of Christ. Each year is a step further along a unique path. A culture with a cyclical worldview, like traditional India or ancient Mesoamerica, creates calendars that are circles. The Maya long count, for all its linear counting of days, was ultimately based on the belief that world ages would be destroyed and reborn. Their rituals were not about pushing history forward, but about ensuring the cycle would continue, that the sun would defeat the darkness of night once more, that the rains would return, that the cosmic order would be maintained. The philosophy of time dictated the purpose of timekeeping. Was it to mark our progression through a unique history, or was it to align ourselves with the eternal, repeating rhythm of the cosmos? This ancient debate reveals that our measurement of time is far more than a practical tool. It is the ultimate expression of our deepest beliefs about the nature of reality, our place within it, and whether our story is a line with a beginning and an end, or a verse in a song that has been and will forever be sung. For centuries, the true sophistication of ancient timekeeping was shrouded in mystery, known only through fragmented texts and enigmatic ruins. The real breakthrough in understanding this lost genius hasn't come from dusty manuscripts, but from the mud, the water, and the sand, from archaeological discoveries that have pulled these magnificent machines from the depths of oblivion and into the light of modern science. Perhaps no single artifact demonstrates this more stunningly than the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in 1901 by sponge divers off the coast of a Greek island. It was initially just a corroded, lumpy chunk of bronze and wood retrieved from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck. For decades, it sat in a museum drawer, its true nature completely overlooked. It wasn't until the 1970s that advanced imaging technology, like gamma-ray and X-ray tomography, finally revealed its secrets. This was no simple statue or navigational tool. It was an incredibly complex analog computer, a clockwork universe inside a box. With over 30 precisely cut bronze gears housed in a wooden frame, it could predict the movements of the sun and moon, track the phases of the moon, and even forecast eclipses. It likely displayed the positions of the 5 known planets and may have been used to calculate the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. This wasn't just a scientific instrument. It was a portable planetarium, a mechanical embodiment of Greek cosmological wisdom that demonstrates a level of technological sophistication we thought was impossible for another 1,000 years. It forces us to completely rewrite the history of technology, proving that the seeds of the mechanical clock were planted not in medieval Europe, but in the Hellenistic world. Yet while the Antikythera mechanism is a singular marvel of precision engineering, other discoveries reveal a different kind of genius, one of sheer scale, permanence, and celestial alignment. The great stone circles and megalithic monuments scattered across Europe, with Stonehenge as the most iconic example, represent an earlier but no less brilliant approach to timekeeping. These were not portable devices but permanent, monumental calendars carved directly into the landscape. The builders of Stonehenge, over thousands of years, painstakingly arranged massive sarsen stones and bluestones to create precise sightlines. The most famous of these is the alignment of the heel stone with the rising sun on the summer solstice. On the longest day of the year, if you stand in the center of the circle, you will see the sun rise directly over that solitary stone, a breathtakingly accurate and powerful annual event. But the sophistication doesn't end there. Archaeoastronomers have identified other alignments that likely marked the winter solstice and the equinoxes. This was a communal computer built of stone, its processing power provided by the movement of the heavens themselves. It transformed the entire Salisbury Plain into a sacred timekeeping space where the entire community could witness and participate in the turning of the year, solidifying their connection to the cosmic order and ensuring their rituals were performed at the most potent celestial moments. The puzzle of ancient timekeeping, however, is a global one, and each new discovery adds a piece from a different corner of the world, revealing a tapestry of interconnected innovation. In the Andes Mountains, archaeologists continue to study the Inca quipu, a fascinating recording device made of knotted cords. For a long time, it was believed these were used primarily for accounting, keeping track of tributes, livestock, and supplies. But recent, more nuanced interpretations suggest their use was far more complex. The variety of knots, their positions on the string, the colors of the cords, and the overall structure may have also encoded narrative information, including historical records and, quite possibly, calendrical data. A specific quipu could have been used by a priest to track the passage of lunar months, the countdown to a solstice ceremony, or the schedule of religious festivals throughout the year. While we haven't yet fully deciphered their code, each new quipu found offers a potential key to understanding how the Inca, without a written script, managed to administer their vast empire with such precision, using a tactile, three-dimensional system of memory and mathematics that was every bit as effective as ink on parchment. These archaeological finds do more than just satisfy our historical curiosity. they form a new, evidence-based foundation for our understanding of the ancient world. Each artifact, from the tiniest gear in the Antikythera mechanism to the largest stone at Stonehenge, is a tangible link to the minds of our ancestors. They allow us to reverse engineer not just their technology, but their intellect and their worldview. By studying the tooth counts on a bronze gear, we can understand their mathematical precision. By mapping the alignments of a stone circle, we can comprehend their astronomical observations. These discoveries shatter the outdated notion of ancient peoples as primitive or superstitious. Instead, they reveal them as master scientists, engineers, and astronomers who looked at the same sky we do and built magnificent, lasting solutions to measure its rhythms. Every new excavation holds the potential to uncover another fragment of this lost chronological wisdom, promising to deepen our appreciation for the global and interconnected human quest to capture time itself. Yet this global diversity in measuring moments raises a fascinating question. How did we eventually settle on the universal units we use today, the hours, minutes, and seconds that structure every aspect of our modern lives? The answer lies in a long and surprising evolution, a story of how ancient, localized needs for scheduling and ritual gradually coalesced into a standardized system that could bridge cultures and continents. It begins not with a grand design, but with the simple, daily challenge of organizing human activity under the vast and variable arc of the sun. The ancient Egyptians, for instance, faced a very practical problem: how to fairly allocate daytime for work and nighttime for watch duties. Their elegant solution was to divide the period of daylight into 12 equal segments, and the darkness of night into another 12, creating the first concept of the 24-hour day. But here's the crucial catch: because the length of daylight changes with the seasons, an Egyptian hour was not a fixed unit. A summer hour of daylight was significantly longer than a winter hour. These were what we now call temporary hours or seasonal hours, fluid periods that stretched and contracted like an accordion with the passing of the year. They marked time using simple shadow clocks, observing the moving gnommon's shadow against a series of unequally spaced lines that accounted for the sun's shifting path. This system wasn't about precision in the way we understand it. It was about creating a reliable, repeating structure for a society deeply tied to the solar cycle, ensuring that prayers, market openings, and civic duties occurred at the correct solar moment, regardless of the season. While the Egyptians were perfecting their solar divisions on the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, the Babylonians were approaching time from a completely different angle: advanced mathematics. Their number system was sexagesimal, meaning it was based on the number 60. This was a stroke of mathematical genius. As 60 is a highly composite number, it can be evenly divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. This made complex calculations and fractions incredibly easy to work with long before the invention of the decimal point. The Babylonians applied this base 60 system to their astronomical observations, dividing the circle into 360 degrees. This celestial geometry naturally bled into their timekeeping. They began to see the daily journey of the sun as another circle to be divided. While they also used temporary hours, their mathematical tradition led them to subdivide those hours into 60 smaller parts, and those parts into 60 even smaller ones. These were the conceptual ancestors of our minutes and seconds. For the Babylonians, this precise division was less about daily scheduling and more about their work as astrologer priests. Accurately calculating the precise positions of planets and stars for their omen texts and ritual calendars required these tiny, consistent units of measure. Their legacy is the reason we still have 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute today. a testament to the enduring power of a clever mathematical choice made over 3,000 years ago. The journey from these flexible, localized systems to our rigid, global standard was a slow process driven by three powerful engines: religion, commerce, and technology. Within the walls of medieval European monasteries, a new need for temporal discipline emerged. The monastic day was divided into 8 canonical hours of prayer, periods like matins, lauds, and vespers, that needed to be observed at specific times, day and night, in all weather. The imprecision of seasonal hours became a problem. How could a monk in a cloudy German winter know when to ring the bell for prime? This urgent need for reliable, uniform timekeeping to regulate devotional life was a major catalyst for the development of mechanical clocks in the 13th and 14th centuries. These weight-driven machines, with their revolutionary verge escapement mechanisms, ticked with a consistent mechanical pulse that was completely independent of the sun. For the first time, it became possible to define an hour as a fixed 60-minute unit of time, regardless of the season or the weather. The clock on the monastery wall began to sever the ancient link between time and the natural world, replacing the variable solar hour with an immutable mechanical one. As these mechanical clocks spread from monasteries to the bell towers of growing medieval cities, the economic imperative of trade accelerated the push for standardization. In bustling market towns, the opening and closing of the gates, the start of the market day, and the hours of artisan guilds all needed to be coordinated. A merchant traveling from one town to another would find that each place kept its own slightly different local solar time. This became a serious hindrance to commerce. The invention of the clock tower, with its loud bells ringing out equal hours over the entire city, created a shared public time that synchronized economic life for everyone within earshot. This was the birth of clock time, a communal agreement to abide by an artificial, but incredibly useful temporal grid. The final step in this journey came with the Age of Exploration and later the Industrial Revolution. As ships began to cross oceans, the need for precise navigation made accurate timekeeping at sea a matter of life, death, and imperial power. Then, with the advent of railroads in the 19th century, the patchwork of local solar times became completely unworkable. A train timetable couldn't function if every town along the line had a different version of noon. This led to the creation of standardized time zones in 1884, which divided the globe into 24 segments, each 1 hour apart. This was the ultimate triumph of the fixed hour, a system that could finally synchronize the entire planet. The ancient Egyptian division of the day into 24 parts, filtered through Babylonian mathematics, refined by monastic discipline, and supercharged by the engine of industry, had finally crystallized into the universal, unwavering units that now pace our every moment, connecting us all to a rhythm first imagined millennia ago beside the Nile. And so, this incredible journey through the epochs of pre-clock timekeeping brings us to a profound realization. Our ancestors did not merely invent ways to mark the hours, they embarked on a monumental quest to find meaning and order in the vast, swirling cosmos, using nothing but their intellect, their powers of observation, and a deep, reverent connection to the world around them. From the moment the first human looked up at the sun and recognized its dependable arc, to the sophisticated gearwork of the Antikythera mechanism, this story is a powerful testament to our species' relentless curiosity and breathtaking ingenuity. These early chronologies were far more than practical tools for scheduling, planting, or navigation. They were the very frameworks upon which civilizations were built. They dictated the rhythms of sacred rituals, legitimized the power of kings and emperors, synchronized the labor of millions, and provided the philosophical underpinnings for understanding humanity's place in the universe. The water clock, the sundial, the celestial calendar, each was a different language spoken to answer the same eternal questions. The legacy of these ancient systems is not confined to history books or museum displays. It is woven into the very fabric of our modern lives, often in ways we scarcely notice. Every time we glance at a clock and see that it is 3:15, we are unconsciously paying homage to the Babylonian love of the number 60. The 7-day week we meticulously plan our lives around is a direct inheritance from ancient astrologers who linked each day to one of the 7 visible celestial bodies. Even our global system of time zones, for all its artificial coordination, is ultimately based on that most ancient of markers, the position of the sun in the local sky. These are the silent, ticking echoes of a distant past, reminding us that our current mastery of time is built upon millennia of observation, innovation, and a shared human desire to impose order on the beautiful chaos of existence. The digital precision we enjoy today stands on the shoulders of stone giants and star-gazing priests. Reflecting on this vast history offers us a crucial perspective in our own hurried, clock-watching era. We have achieved a level of chronological precision our ancestors could never have dreamed of, with atomic clocks that are accurate to within a fraction of a second over millions of years. Yet, in this relentless pursuit of punctuality, have we lost something vital? The pre-clock world understood time as something fluid, local, and deeply integrated with the natural environment, a rhythm to be felt and experienced, not just a number to be obeyed. Their time was told by the crowing of a rooster, the blooming of a flower, or the rising of a star. It was sensory, holistic, and inherently harmonious. Our modern, commodified time can often feel like a tyrant, a source of constant pressure and anxiety. The story of humanity's first timekeepers invites us to occasionally step off this frantic treadmill, to look up at the night sky, and to remember a time when we were not masters of the clock, but thoughtful participants in the grand cosmic dance. It reminds us that our quest to measure time is at its heart a story about what it means to be human, to seek understanding, to build community, and to find our rhythm